today we're lucky that we've got my colleague Layla McCay from the Confederation, and Layla is the international lead. And Layla has been leading a lot of work with the Brexit Healthcare Alliance and the Cavendish Coalition, and they've been doing a lot of the negotiation, taking information from all arts and parts and feeding that back into government, so those positions are well informed. And Layla's going to give us a wee bit of an overview of some of the work that they're doing in England and on the ongoing conversations. And then Cathy Harrison, who's the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer at the department, has been taking the lead for the HSC in Northern Ireland. And Cathy's going to give us a presentation with Patricia Quinn Duffy, just on all the ongoing work and the preparations that's happening in Northern Ireland. And then we'll really just come back. So hopefully that'll take about half an hour, 25 minutes, and then we'll have the rest of the time just for dialogue and questions, conversations and comments. So as usual, if you want to, please just make a commentary in the chat box so that people can see if you agree or disagree or some of your questions, and then we'll just go to questions, and you can say then at that stage who you are and what your question is, or you can do a hands up if you want, or just let me know in some way. But we're just going to invite Layla to kick off, and Layla, just to give us a wee bit of an overview of some of the work and things that you're concentrating on just right at the minute.
Thanks very much, Heather. And yeah, as Heather says, I have been working very vigorously on Brexit and its implications for the health sector over the past several years. And I thought today I would just briefly touch on 3 areas. First, the current situation around the negotiations. Then just having a quick look at the changes that will be happening at the end of the transition, regardless of whether there's a deal or not. And then I will touch on what's being done to prepare at a UK-wide level and a little bit of England level. And then I will pass over for further Northern Ireland context. So I'll start off with the current situation on the negotiations for the future relationship between the UK and the EU. And as we know, that should be kicking in on the 1st of January. And I think it's fair to say that we weren't expecting to get quite so close to the deadline without an agreement. We're essentially in extra time now. We're trying really, when I say we, I mean the country, not me personally, but the UK is trying really hard at the moment to secure a trade deal that will complement the withdrawal agreement that already exists. And of course, the withdrawal agreement already provides an outline for how Great Britain works with Northern Ireland after Brexit has happened on the 1st of January. So as all of this is going on, we're thinking, oh my goodness, how close to the wire can we actually cut it? It's a great question, because we already thought we were past that point, but no. There's various potential deals, dates for the deal to be signed off. But remember that it has to be ratified both by the UK and the EU. And the last that we heard, the European Parliament said they want to see the text by this Sunday if they've got enough time to give it proper scrutiny. So given that, we could see something at any moment. Equally, it could, of course, drag on until the 31st of December. We've heard some chat that the European Parliament might be willing to vote on it as late as the 28th. So those of us working on this are thinking that's not going to be a relaxing Christmas period. There is, of course, a lot at stake for health within the talks. As we're hearing, all the angst and confusion and negotiations at the moment are around things like fisheries and the level playing field and governance. These are the barriers to getting the deal done, but they're not what we're interested in seeing within the health sector so much as, obviously, the issues that do affect us. Things like the use of the EHIC cards and the various futures that could happen for reciprocal healthcare and for cost recovery. Access to systems for tackling things like communicable diseases. This feels like a poor moment in time to be reducing access to things that help manage COVID-19, for example. And of course, taking part in EU-wide research and making sure that patients get access to new treatments as quickly as they possibly can. So those are the sorts of things that we've been working really hard to argue in favour of getting the right provisions in place. and looking at the NHS to see where there's risks and speaking up about them. And not just the NHS, but recognising that there is this wider health ecosystem. So that's what the Brexit Health Alliance, which we lead, is all about. Essentially, it brings together industry and public health and patient voice and research. All these various different sectors come together to identify our common goals for Brexit and to try and encourage the various negotiators to achieve those. So, for example, yesterday we saw some fruits of our campaigns when the government agreed to fund routine overseas treatments for people who would otherwise not be able to get them and thus not be able to travel, like, for example, people who need regular dialysis. So let's just move over to changes after the end of the transition, which will happen regardless of whether a deal takes place or not. And I think relevant here is that, of course, the Northern Ireland Protocol will be implemented. I mean, until recently, it's been pretty high level as to what some of the changes to the relationship will be, but that is becoming increasingly clear. Last week, I'm sure many of you know that the Joint Committee reached agreement on EU presence in Northern Ireland, border checks, trading in Northern Ireland. That's all been really helpful to provide clarity because we're really operating in this challenging situation that we're about to have to make changes, and in some cases we just don't quite know what they're going to be. In practice, the Northern Ireland Protocol agreements mean that trade from Northern Ireland to Great Britain will continue as before, but that goods coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland will be treated as though they were coming into the EU. That won't mean physical infrastructure, but what it will mean is having to do various import declarations for different things. The good news is for the NHS and the wider health sector that the agreement does protect the flow of medicines into Northern Ireland, and it grants industry up to 12 months to adapt to the new rules. So hopefully that will avoid disruption to critical medical supplies. The second change is that essentially the UK is going to leave the single market and the customs union. So as well as having those new border arrangements, you know, that will have some impacts on medical supplies, and in particular, it'll have an impact because of the added time and faff that is involved in getting goods from one place to another. These extra things will just add a bit of time on, so we're going to have to prepare for a bit of disruption to deliveries and potentially even slightly longer term taking longer to come. So, for example, 1 in 5 medical devices at the moment that are used in specialist procedures arrive overnight or just in time. So those just-in-time procedures that the NHS uses so much may need to be adapted based upon new timelines. And I think that we should just expect significant disruption at the various borders due to the various processes coming in. So what is being done to prepare? Well, I mean, essentially the NHS is preparing for a deal and for no deal, and the disruptions that are going to be involved with that. Given that we are only 2 weeks away from the end of the transition period, it is very sensible to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. In England, the government's taking a centralised approach, so working with major suppliers to make sure that the medicines, devices and other essentials are stockpiled ahead of time. And that is complemented by plans to reroute stocks if certain ports become too congested, and various other mitigating measures. There's various escalation routes if shortages are to occur. And essentially, lots of these continuity challenges are being managed at the central level. NHS leaders are being asked not to stockpile medicines and not to change prescribing behaviours. And hopefully all of those mitigations together will be able to chart a smooth path. It's fair to say that while COVID-19 has brought all sorts of disruption and mean that these changes are not coming at an especially helpful time, it has also helped us to prepare, because quite a lot of the mechanisms that were developed to reduce disruption during Brexit have already now been tested by using them during COVID. So in some ways that's quite helpful. There's various emergency response mechanisms that we now have working quite well, which is good. Obviously, at the moment, everybody is very, very focused on the second and maybe third waves of COVID-19. Makes this all a very challenging context, shall we say. Things are clearly looking different since the last time we prepared for no deal. And as I say, some things are looking better because we know that we have mechanisms that are now working quite well. Some things are looking worse because the health service is incredibly overstretched, working incredibly hard under so much pressure, and these additional adjustments are not necessarily going to be welcomed. Staff are exhausted, and we do expect that Brexit will create a significant extra burden. So from our perspective, we're hoping for a deal. We're preparing for a potential worst case scenario. We're continuing to push right up into the last minute to encourage a deal to take place. And we acknowledge that essentially this is a really complex system. The health service is under quite a lot of different pressures at the moment, and this is certainly going to add to them, but we're working really hard to make sure that the mitigations are in place. So I think that that's about it as a starting point for me. I'll hand back over to you, Heather.
Thank you. No, that's great, Layla. I suspect that some of the things Cathy's going to say will just sort of chime in and be the Northern Ireland specific of what you're saying, and then we can sort of move to some of the dialogue and some of the things that people really want to know. How does that, I think it's often these things are quite high level and you're like, what's that going to feel and look like in our organisation? So Cathy, I'm going to invite you to just join us and give your overview.
Thank you, Heather. I'm going to share my screen now. I've got some slides to go through here.
Well done, Cathy, sharing your screen. Very good. Well done, Cathy.
Okay, just need to go into slideshow. Sorry, everyone. A little bit. There's always a sort of moment when you're not sure if it's going to work. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come along today. And for the next sort of 20 minutes or so, myself and my colleague Patricia are going to talk through some of the EU transition work that we've been involved with in Northern Ireland, and we do want to leave a good bit of time for questions. So I can see from some of the people who are on the who are attending today that you have heard some of this before, and Heather, I am going to deliberately sort of be quite high level as we go through, because some of it, you're quite right, Layla has touched on. So the real, I suppose, was the purpose of our presentation today, really, just to bring you back to that. Throughout all of this process over the last number of years, I suppose that we've become very clear about what our purpose is in Northern Ireland, and my role in leading the EU work. And it's always been about our patients in Northern Ireland, and regardless in which way the twists and turns of the political decision making that has gone on, we have remained focused entirely on our patients. And there's two specific principles, you know, that what I'm returning to continually, and that is that really we should not see any changes in terms of the quality of care or access to care that our patients should have, and that there should not be inequity between Northern Ireland and other parts of the UK. And actually those principles may sound very common sense, but actually they're becoming more and more relevant as we get into the detail. So in preparation for end of transition period, the department has published some updated operational readiness guidance that went out a few weeks ago, and that has been distributed right across HSE organisations and services, and they're working through it. Now, it was an update to previous guidance, so it didn't just land on people. It was an update to previous guidance given out in August. And it was very much predicated on the fact that we are still planning on no deal. So all of our contingency plans are still focused on the potential of a no deal scenario. That has always been the case, and it is actually, in a way, frustrating as the bigger picture is, that has actually helped us, because it means that when we sent out the updated guidance, organisations could rely on the fact they'd already got plans in place and maybe just needed to update. We're going to talk about three big chunks of work, I suppose, and three big chunks that EU impacts on. One is healthcare supplies, The others, people and cross-border issues, and finally data. And as I say, allow a good bit of time for question and answers. So on healthcare supplies, just by way of context, when I started to look at this a few years ago, what we realised was that about 76% of all of our medicines that we use in the UK in general, and that would include Northern Ireland, have an EU touch point at some point, and that about 74% of all of those actually were transported over the short straits in the English Channel. So a range of national contingencies were developed, and the contingencies focused on the particular pinch point that was identified for supply chain, which Layla has mentioned, and that is that if you have such a heavy reliance on one particular route for delivery of practically all of our healthcare supplies, there's a really high risk that any disruption at all that occurs that could be out of our control on the EU side could disrupt our supplies. So national contingencies are in place, and they cover a huge range of products, and they're all listed there. I mean, hopefully that covers everything that all of the people on the call here would have an interest in. And national contingencies are in place now with extra stock held in the supply chain. There's specific mitigations in place in relation to changes to ferry routes. So our goods are actually going to be classified as category 1 and moved away from the short straits into alternative ports. Also a big emphasis on trader readiness and enhanced
You couldn't say, what do you mean by short straits?
Oh yeah, the short straits, that's the English Channel. So sorry, the English Channel. So Dover, Calais.
Okay.
That's where most of the trade happens. Most of the goods into GB come across there. Heather, sorry, I could have made that clearer. So now some of our goods in healthcare, there's arrangements in place, and we have contracts with ferry operators that means that goods, healthcare goods coming in through Europe will actually be diverted away from those busy ports, and that with the aim that we will not, if we get into a no deal with some certainty and disruption, it won't affect healthcare products as badly as it could have without those mitigations. A little bit about shortages. Across all of those areas that I've talked about in healthcare supplies, every single one of those different areas that are listed there at the top, every single one of those has a shortage response group associated with it at a national level that all of the 4 countries are linked in with. And just by example, the medicine shortage group is a very active group, and the work that they have been doing over the last couple of years has absolutely supported us through COVID. And this is really, it is allowing a much higher level of understanding of the whole supply chain, which is, after all, is global. And it's allowed us to really look way into the future, sometimes months ahead, and see potential problems and put in place arrangements so that it does not affect our front line. And that's another important principle here around the work that's being done here, all about preventing action to be taken at the front line where possible by putting in a lot of contingencies further back in the supply chain. And this is a great example, and it's working very well for us. So the sorts of things that the service would see now more regularly are supply disruption alerts that will be able to say a product isn't available, you should change your prescribing onto this product, the disruption's only going to last X weeks, etc. And other things like serious shortage protocols, which are the legal enabler for our pharmacies to make changes to prescriptions for minor amendments in the case of a short-term shortage. A lot of work as well is being done in medical devices and clinical consumables, and in Northern Ireland, BSO, they are very important to manage a lot of the central supplies to our health and social care services, particularly our trusts. And they have looked at their most commonly used, like 1,700 lines, and they now have in place in Northern Ireland 10 weeks use of those and access to further stocks within the GB. And there's also, they're also linked in with different supply disruption groups. Looking a little bit more closely at the Northern Ireland supply chain, what we know here is that, on the left there is a very simplistic diagram which tells you how medicines get to us as patients. you know, start at the manufacturer, goes through a wholesaler, pharmacy and patient, and that system has always just been one system for the UK. Okay, and after the 1st of January that will change, and the reason for that is that from the 1st of January the Northern Ireland Protocol comes into effect, and that the implication of that for us in the healthcare supplies is that Northern Ireland still has to comply with certain areas of legislation and regulations that are regulated by Europe, and Great Britain does not. And so you can see then on the right, you know, why is this a big issue? It's because, you know, practically all of our medicines and a very high percentage of our devices come through the Great Britain supply chain. So I've covered some of these things. So some of the implications of of Northern Ireland staying within the EU acquis and GB not is that we're still going to, Northern Ireland will still have to comply with certain EU directives. A big one is Falsified Medicines Directive, which affects how our medicines are, well, it affects even how our medicines are labelled, and it's going to have a big impact on our manufacturers, because they will have to manufacture product specifically labelled for the Northern Ireland market. So there's a big question mark there for them about how they're going to do it mainly, and also feasibility of that for such a small market as well. There's also specific changes relating to importation authorizations, and also an additional check is also going to be introduced into the manufacturing stage, which means that all medicines bound into Northern Ireland are going to have to be batch tested by a qualified person, which is adding in another layer. So there's a number of different issues here on medical supplies, and there are also issues with devices. Now, critically, and Layla referred to this, critically, we realised that we just didn't have time for all of these changes to come into effect on the 1st of January 2021, and industry lobbied very, very hard, and they had to lobby very hard at a European level, and we with the government support, and the UK government now have actually secured a 12-month phase-in period for all of these changes relating to medicines. And that's significant, and what that means really is that in Northern, we're not going to have a sort of an immediate impact. And I think that's an important reassurance to give, and it was a critical decision for us. We heard about it on the 5th of November, but it was really only ratified completely yesterday. So it's very important in that we do not need to make any changes, and we don't foresee any issues in relation to our medicines supply chain immediately in day one, months one sorts of issues. The Falsified Medicines Directive still, unfortunately, for everyone in Northern Ireland will still apply, and we've given specific advice out to the service on that, and there's more information on our website as well about it. So what's happening now is the department is going to have, we've worked very well with DHSC and also MHRA, who are the medicines regulator. Now, MHRA are going to continue to be our regulator, but our relationship with them will change, and there's a recognition that we're going to need much more bilateral conversations, meetings, etc., and much more formal than we have been before when we were just part of the UK, and quite an intensive programme of work that will be starting after Christmas. And that is because the changes that I've referred to there very briefly, and some of the compliance that is going to be needed, really do need very significant large-scale changes. And it's industry's responsibility to do that, but we recognise that at government level and from the regulator point of view, they will need support, and there will need to be some big decisions that are made to maintain our supply chain. We're also going to be looking very carefully now over the coming weeks, in particular monitoring what's happening, and we are moving into a response phase where we will be dealing with, if we have any disruption at our ports coming into Northern Ireland, for example. We're also looking at costs, because again, we don't anticipate we're going to have an immediate day one or month one impact on costs, and that's partly because there's so much stock in the UK supply chain at the moment. But as that starts to flow through and be backfilled from potentially more costly stock coming in from EU, we can potentially see some cost inflation later in the year, and be working with the pharmaceutical industry. So these are our key messages that we are using, I suppose, that summarise the position as we are, where we are at the moment, and that is the overall assurance that extensive local and national contingencies are in place to ensure healthcare supplies. That means that all of the work that has been done within the supply chain means there is no need for local stockpiling of any product unless advised to do so by the department. And we've stepped in a couple of different scenarios where we've identified a weak point, but other than that, no one needs to do anything. And particularly for patients and carers, they don't need to order additional prescriptions, and prescribers don't need to change their habits either. If shortages arise, they happen all the time anyway. We have good tried and tested systems in place. If they do, advice will follow, and we will be fully supporting the HSC. And there's a lot of information on our website, including some frequently asked questions, and also these slides are uploaded on our website at the moment. That's the key messages around supplies. And the final little thing I want to say on that before I hand over to Patricia is there is a need. Great Britain, I think, is regarded now as a third country, and our goods moving in from Great Britain to Northern Ireland will be imported and exported, going the other way. And a trader support service has been established to support businesses. And one of the things here that has become apparent in the last few weeks is, the trader support service initially, I suppose anyone reading that would think, well, that's the big traders, that's people who are moving goods, you know, your Tesco's and, you know, Asda and people like that. But actually and we always knew it would impact on our large medicine suppliers, like our wholesalers, pharmaceutical industry, etc. And however, the trader support service is also there for any business that is ordering goods direct from GB, and there is a need for any business who does that to register with, well, there's a recommendation, this isn't mandatory, there's really recommended to register. So for example, all of our dentists have been advised to register, our optometrists, our care homes where they do order goods themselves and they don't come through central stock or from Northern Ireland sources, and all of our community pharmacies. So they're not necessarily initially the people that you think would have to, and that of course extends to any other business as well. So that's all the stuff on supplies. I'm going to hand over to Patricia now for people. Patricia, I'll move your slides on for you when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to talk you through some of the implications of EU exit on people. So it's around access to healthcare in particular, and around workforce, just to give you a sort of heads up what the changes are in that sphere. Next slide, please, Cathy. The first thing is that the EU withdrawal agreement, which was signed at the beginning of the year, which set out the transition period, does have a significant part in it which sets out citizens' rights. Now what it means really is that if we have any EEA citizens living and working in Northern Ireland, it maintains their rights to their European rights going forward, and also the same for frontier workers. And particularly in Northern Ireland, we have a significant amount of frontier workers because we have the land border, and frontier workers in Northern Ireland tend to be of all types of workers, whereas people flying in and out of the UK or the rest of Europe tend to be of a particular type of frontier working. Now what this means is that people who are under the scope of the withdrawal agreement will have their social security rights under the regulations 883 of 2004, European regulations, means they will be able to continue to live and work within the UK, pay their taxes, have their social security, their benefits, their pensions, and also their access to healthcare and their reciprocal healthcare rights, which means that for this cohort of people, they will still be able to have an EHIC, which is supplied by the UK, will still be able to use an S2, which is a planned care route to Europe. For Northern Ireland, it tends to be for maternity care to Europe, and also will be able to retire in the future to another European country and have their social security, their pension and their healthcare paid for by the UK. And just to let you know that for this cohort of people, the EHIC scheme has opened for their new registration for their new EHIC. It's on gov.uk. On this slide, there's a couple of explainers around what citizens' rights means and what the withdrawal agreement rights means. Next slide, please, Cathy. For the EEA citizens within this cohort, they do need to register with the settlement scheme. This settlement scheme has now been opened for quite some time, and it is opened until the 30th of June next year, when all EEA citizens that have been in country by the 31st of December this year should have applied. The scheme is opened, and there have been a significant number of people that have already applied for it. In fact, I think the UK government have actually been very surprised. They had underestimated the number of people that would be applying for it, which is an excellent thing. Irish citizens who are in this cohort don't need to apply for settled status. Irish citizens that have used their right of free movement that live in Northern Ireland do have a special immigration status within the UK due to the common travel area, which allows British and Irish citizens to live and work freely in each other's jurisdictions. So they don't need to apply for settled status. Obviously, it's really imperative on everyone to encourage people to apply for settlement scheme, and if anyone has difficulties, to point them in the direction of support services. Advice NI have the support scheme, and there's information on NI Directive where people can get support to go through the settlement scheme if they have difficulties with technology or language. So it's really encouraging everybody to do that. Next slide, please, Cathy. Frontier working is obviously very important for us in Northern Ireland. Anyone that's a frontier worker who lives in Ireland and works in Northern Ireland, frontier worker is a particular definition under European regulations. You should be returning home daily or at least once a week with your frontier working. Any EEA citizens that live in Ireland and work in Northern Ireland do need to apply for a frontier worker permit. This scheme has opened from the 10th of December, and again is opened until the 30th of June next year. And again, you should be encouraging staff in that cohort to apply for that, to allow them to continue to work after the 1st of July next year. Again, Irish citizens that live in Ireland and work in Northern Ireland don't need to apply for a frontier worker permit, but may do if they wish. Any British citizens or people of Northern Ireland who are Irish citizens that live in the Republic, under British law, under UK law, they are deemed to be dual nationals, and they don't need to apply for a frontier worker permit, and in fact will not be eligible to apply. But their rights will be maintained. It's important that people understand that just because they don't have a permit doesn't mean their rights have been diminished. They still fall under the withdrawal agreement code, and all of those rights still are maintained. Next slide, please, Cathy. Also part of the withdrawal agreement is where you have European qualified professionals who are registered with regulators in Northern Ireland. These professional qualifications and their registration will continue to be accepted in the UK. And in fact, the UK have put in place contingencies around professional qualifications where there is a continuation of the temporary and occasional regulation and registration for up to a year or to finish a service delivery once it has been started. A temporary and occasional is a slightly different registration with the regulators, in that there is not a cost and it is only for a particular period of time and only for a year. What the UK is also going to do is that if you are an automatic qualification, so say for example if doctors and nurses would be automatically recognised, that will continue. What will disappear is the general registration process, and so qualifications where there isn't automatic recognition, or there are in other qualifications, those people will have to go through from the 1st of January the rest of world registration process. Next slide, please, Cathy. Also from the 1st of January, the UK will introduce a new points-based immigration system. This means from them that any new EEA, EU or Swiss citizens that come to live and want to work in the UK will need to have a particular visa. Most people will be coming into the country under a skilled worker route, which is currently the Tier 2 type visa. This will mean that all of the professionals that we would normally employ through Europe that currently don't need visas will require them from the 1st of January. It is a change in how we recruit from Europe, and obviously it means that the free movement is no longer quite as simple as it had been. However, the immigration system has been expanded to look at sort of medium skilled roles, which would be down to A level and above. The salary bands at which someone needs to earn has been reduced down to a minimum of 20,600 rather than 30,000. And you also don't need to do an in-country check to see if there's someone internally within the UK that can do the role. And there are also no limits on the amount of skilled workers that can be brought in through this route. So there are a few things that are slightly different. Where we are significantly impacted is that the lower skilled roles around, particularly in social care workers, will not be able to get a visa through this route come 1st of January. And this has been an issue, and we have raised it at every opportunity possible, as it isn't just an issue for us in Northern Ireland, but right across the UK. And it's not, I suppose it's quite disappointing that it hasn't, the immigration system doesn't include it, but the system, however, does, as a result of COVID, has had some changes which will help health and social care for other professionals from right across the world. So it includes the rest of the world as well, in that we have the health and care visa, which began in August, which is a cheaper route for the person themselves applying for the visa. It should be a quicker visa application for health and care workers, and also they don't have to pay the immigration health surcharge, which is a significant cost for professionals and families coming to the UK. At the minute it's £624 per person per year, and that has been waived for health and care workers right across any role which is integral to the health and care provision within the UK. Next slide, please, Cathy. The other issue that impacts on people and on everyone is the reciprocal healthcare rights. As I said, the withdrawal agreement cohort will maintain these rights. In the absence of an agreement with the EU, these rights will not continue for everyone else. What this means is that when you travel within Europe, you may not be able to use your European health insurance card, or EHIC, when you're away on your holidays. Being able to retire to Europe and have your healthcare paid for through what is called an S1 won't be available, and also then the S2 for planned care won't be available either for people who don't fall within the cohort of the withdrawal agreement. Obviously, we're hoping that the negotiations do turn out to be a positive phase, because the understanding is that this is not a sticking point. Obviously, the sticking points are around fisheries and a level playing field, but this hasn't been one. So we're hoping that we can come to an agreement and that we will have a positive outcome here. Layla had indicated that there was an announcement yesterday, which is around care for people with ongoing healthcare needs, that they need continued treatment. These predominantly will be oxygen therapies and dialysis treatments and some chemotherapy treatments. These currently would fall under an EHIC, where the person can organise their own treatment when they go on holiday for a week or a fortnight, or for longer if necessary. And this scheme will, in the event of a no deal, will give a bit of solace to that group of people that will have particular healthcare needs if they wish to travel within Europe in the future, because they will also need to get travel insurance, which we expect to be increased in cost, because the EHIC would have covered needs arising care for other issues as well, and that won't be available. We are working on, and we have been involved very much so in the negotiations between the UK and Ireland on an enduring reciprocal healthcare agreement. This is under the CTA arrangements, and those arrangements are long-standing between the UK and Ireland, and really predate completely both the Irish and British membership of the EU, and aren't dependent on it. Traditionally, the CTA allows British and Irish citizens to move freely within the jurisdictions and have rights and privileges, as I've said before, around living and working, voting, studying. You know, so there's a lot of an access to healthcare. There's a lot of things that British and Irish citizens are able to do in each other's jurisdictions. What this negotiation and agreement is about the future of kind of a reciprocal healthcare cooperation. And both the UK and Ireland are very much committed to ensuring that these are in place by the end of the year. They're in a very, very good place, but obviously with the other negotiations going on, they're taking a slight back seat at the moment, but they will be, in whatever circumstance we come to, they will be in place by the end of the year. And these arrangements will ensure that within the UK and Ireland, citizens and residents, so it will not just be British and Irish citizens, it will be any residents within the UK and residents within Ireland will be able to access necessary healthcare when travelling within the two jurisdictions. They will be able to arrange planned care treatment, which is important in Northern Ireland. We would have a significant amount of people travel to the Republic to have stem cell bone marrow treatments. And it also means that in the future, new frontier workers will also be able to have their continued rights similar to they have now in the future, which is very good to have, because of Northern Ireland on our border. This is particularly important to us to ensure that these things are in place. Next slide, please, Cathy. So really the key messages here are that the EU withdrawal agreement does maintain rights for a certain cohort of citizens, and it's important that you find out whether or not you fall into this bracket and whether you have rights. I will just add here that this does include family members, dependents, and survivors. So there's a significant amount of people that may be within this group. The settlement scheme is open until the 30th of June. The Frontier Workers Scheme is now open and also open until the 30th of June. And any new employees from Europe from the 1st of January will need to have a new visa to work in the UK. Next slide, please, Cathy.
Okay, Heather, I'm just going to run through very quickly now, a couple of things on data.
I'm just keen to have enough time for folk to ask some questions. Yeah, I know there's a lot of information to get through.
There's a lot of it. The main message really on data here is that there's no issue in terms of the transfer of data between the UK and the EU. Okay, after the 1st of January, the transfer of data from EU to UK, however, the EU uses adequacy process. So ideally, we would like an adequacy agreement to be in place. Okay, that has not yet been negotiated and agreed. It's unlikely to be in place by the end of the transition period. So instead of that, at the moment, for all of our services, I've got some like this, that we're relying on the flow of data. We have service level agreements and MOUs in place that will cover us. So in terms of data, all of our organisations are ready. It's not in an ideal, absolute final state where we need to be, but all of the contingencies are in place. There's good advice available as well for the HSE and businesses. And there's some very useful links here. All of these slides are on our website, Heather, and there's some good links on there if people want to go back and look in more detail. And we've also got our guidance and frequently asked questions on there as well. Heather, thank you very much.
Okay, no, Cathy, that's absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much. So I'm going to open it up for comments or questions. I'm sure folk will be very interested to see how that quite a significant amount of technical information just applies in their own environments. So if Megan's helpfully put those slides up, and we'll do a wee email out after the event. So just want to invite Cathy. One of the things, just while folk are thinking there, that I find is that people get very fixated on their wee part of the system. In the overall withdrawal agreement, if there's a no deal, supplies in and out, is there a chance that all of the ports could just get jammed and just the general disruption would begin to impact on services?
Heather, it might be a good question for Layla, because it probably is beyond, if she's still on, because it's
I think she's there.
A little bit more than just Northern Ireland.
Oh, are you there, Layla? I know she sent me a letter last week that in the southeast, they have written to some of the trusts because they feel that actually it might impact on the healthcare, and people won't be able to get to their hospitals and their healthcare facilities because of the amount of lorries and spaces there. So she mustn't be. Oh, she's here. She's here. Right. It's very good at speaking for herself. Go on, Layla.
Sorry about that. Could you repeat the question? I'm having a little bit of trouble.
Yes, I was just asking, and everybody's focused on their own small part of the system and if it's working, but generically, if there's a no deal, some of the other social impacts, like just the port clogging, traffic jams, general civil distress, things like that.
Yeah, I think that is certainly an issue, and I know that from having seen the Department of Health and Social Care here, looking at the various disruptions, they have got quite a long list of contingencies of things that could go wrong. But really, I think that the main concern is around the southeast, those parts that are near ports and are on port-related routes. So it's mostly the disruption in terms of there being big delays at the ports, causing big backups of traffic, blocking access to hospitals, particularly along the M20 route, blocking access for ambulances to get to patients, blocking access for healthcare staff to get to their clinics, to do home visits. Those sorts of things are particularly concerning at the moment in terms of that sort of wider disruption. Obviously, it could also block other things that need to be delivered as well, which could have a knock-on impact on people's health. But really, that seems to be the primary concern when they look at that. There could, of course, then be knock-on effects if there are certain goods that are delayed, even if they're not healthcare goods that we'll need to keep an eye on.
Okay, that's smashing. So I wonder any other questions or comments about how this might be impacting your... Mike, do you want to come in? Yep.
Yeah, just want to let
Can you just say who you are, Mike, for colleagues that won't know you? Although that's probably very few people, Mike.
No, I'm Mike Sutton. I'm the director of the Regional Medicines Optimization Innovation Centre for the region based in Northern Trust. We do a lot of research, and we're part of Horizon 2020, or a couple of those grants. Now that's coming to an end now this year, and then it's Europe 2027. I'm not sure, maybe Layla, it's yourself. Can we be partners or participants or bid within Europe 2027? Because that's all starting to come off, and all the, the coordination, support actions, those sorts of things. Are we still eligible, or are we not welcome?
I think that's a to be confirmed situation. There's quite a few. Actually, my colleague Ilse, who is gets down into a bit more of the detail of those things, is asking to come in. Can we bring Ilse in, who might have something a bit more specific to say on that?
Hi guys, I'm from the NHS Confed team, the international team. I just wanted to comment on that, because we have been looking at it. We work with partners in Readiness. Obviously, Horizon Europe will start in the 1st of January. UK has been traditionally really successful, lots of funding, been a major partner for really big clinical trials and studies, but at the moment there isn't agreement, and the main sticking points at the moment are on the financial contribution. So this is around how much we put in versus what we get out of the programs. So at the moment, if there's no deal, there's no prospect of joining. If there's a deal, there is a prospect of joining, and I think it's going to get pretty close. I would say that if there isn't a deal and we're not joining, there are some associated countries, and the UK government has said that they would like to maximise UK participation. So there'll be lots of things put in place to try and up the participation. Alternative funding schemes that the UK government will roll out as well. I don't think it will approximate what we had before, and it will take a few years for us to ever get up to that point, if that's the case. But at least it is something that's being considered, and moving on. The final point, I think, just to note, is that actually it will also depend on the multi-annual financial framework, and all of the administration around the Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, being rolled out. Which has taken a bit longer than expected in the European Union, so it could all be a little bit delayed in any case. Does that help with your question?
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
Cathy, yes, come on ahead, Cathy.
Heather, yeah, I think yesterday Brandon Lewis did announce the 200 million Peace Plus programme. Now, it isn't the same, okay, nowhere near. It's not the same in terms of the sorts of collaborations that Mike would have been interested in the European level, but it does open up a lot of opportunities potentially for us working with Ireland, and also I think it's with Scotland as well potentially. So there's opportunities there, certainly.
Okay.
Thanks, Cathy. Thank you.
I've been chairing a lot of these Zooms, and I've never had anybody so quiet. That's obviously the sheer amount of technical information. I'm going to pick on a few people, so you're warned. Yeah.
Can I just ask one more, just one more? Cathy, you mentioned data, sort of normal healthcare data. In terms of research data, we are participating currently. What are the rules, or in terms of data access, sharing, or storage of data, or data flows in the interim? Because that's more in research rather than standard, operational healthcare data. Is there any differences or potential issues there?
Mike, I don't have anyone on the call. I haven't got my data person on participating today, but we can come back to you with that. My understanding is that there's a lot of advice has been issued on this subject, and that I'm sure, I don't know if there's anyone on from Public Health Agency that could speak about it, but Mike will come back to you after the call on that one. Thank you.
All right,
I'll just pop a little briefing that we've done in the chat box in case some of it might be relevant.
Brilliant, Layla, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, we've got a lot of different types of folks from the pharma sector, from voluntary community organisations. If folk want to ask any questions about making sure that you're prepared or you're getting information you want to comment, very, very welcome to join the conversation. Other than that, I'm going to pick on some folk. Declan, I see you're on the call there. I know you're on mute. Would you want to comment? I know that there's been a lot of conversation about the social care workforce. Has been an ongoing conversation. How have the NISC been working on that?
I think, Heather, it's been an ongoing conversation with, I suppose, with the department as well. I mean, we're particularly disappointed that I suppose the Immigration Authority didn't consider the social care sector. Yeah. Particularly, it was difficult when they say we don't. I mean, a large part of our social care workforce certainly do not meet those thresholds in terms of salary, and it is going to be extremely difficult. We have about, I think, about 8 to 9% within our current workforce, and of course, after the 1st of January, that's probably going to be as high as it probably will get. We have done as much engagement as we can around social care at this stage, and I know in discussions with Patricia, we don't see a route for trying to improve that anytime soon. And from our perspective, it really is about looking locally to our social care sector, trying to deal with those challenges in the social care sector around terms and conditions, around career profiles. And from our perspective, in working with the Minister and the Department of Health, it's about raising the profile for social care as a career in Northern Ireland. And that's where all of our focus is at the moment, Heather.
I think certainly with a lot of the work that I'm doing in general, no matter what conversation you're having in healthcare, is the top line conversation. The second conversation after that is workforce. You know, so there's a lot of challenges on that. I wonder, I see a couple of chairs involved there, Peter or Jonathan. I don't know whether you'd want to comment about preparedness you feel that in the trusts. Jonathan, are you about? I'll pick on you. You're there. I did warn him, I might pick on him. There he is.
Yes, thank you very much.
So Jonathan's the chair of the South Eastern Trust.
Hello, folks. I suppose I'm not as equipped as some of my operational colleagues to speak about this as they would be, but I think from a board perspective and from the briefings that we've been working with on the information, I would say we're as prepared as we can be. There are still, even at this short distance, a lot of unknowns. And we will depend on resilience of people here and the ingenuity of making a way through as we get those final hurdles and when they appear. So from a trust point of view and from a board point of view, I believe we're as far down the line as we actually can be, and that we can take the things in our stride as best we can. We're going to be in the same boat as everybody else. But I think, as so often is the case, our people will pull us through, because we will find the ways to overcome the hurdles and get the job done.
Okay. Okay. Neil Johnston's also on the line from Chest, Heart and Stroke. Neil, how have you been planning as a voluntary community organisation?
So
I did tell people, I did warn people I'd pick on them, and you know me. You're never safe.
To be honest, you know, we're really just interested in the subject from the patient perspective. You know, obviously a lot of our patients, you know, we get a lot of feedback from them, and they're just, you know, people pick things up from the media, which isn't particularly helpful, frankly, you know, because it seems to be just one of those stories that the media run with every few weeks, that there's going to be medicine shortages, and usually these things are without foundation. So really, you know, it's just that's just really our interest in it, was that we do get people who raise concerns because, you know, well, a variety of reasons. Just for example, some people have been switched medicines during this, so that raises concerns as well. So I think just, you know, there's an anxiety out there that people just won't be able to access their medicines, regardless of the fact that there doesn't appear to be any real foundation for that fear.
Okay, well, but the workforce issues and the cross-border issues
hasn't really raised
on
its
your
head
staff?
with us. No.
Okay. Thurlow, you were looking in there.
It was just, I suppose.
Do you want to say where you're from?
Oh yeah, I'm a community pharmacist, and so it was really in relation to medicine supply was part of it as well. And I was just wondering, in terms of the views, I suppose following on from Neil as well, that we've received confirmation today just that there's one of the largest short-line wholesalers is pulling out of the Northern Ireland market from the end of this month, and that there's probably the second largest player in the market has now developed Northern Ireland's differential pricing from the remainder of GB. And so pharmacy remuneration is based on English prices. And so whereas now we are going to be, in essence, after the derogation period, dispensing differentially licensed products. And so we're not linked to it. And so that it was really in terms of the mitigations with supply for community pharmacy and the impact that that may have in terms of the viability. And it will equally have a knock-on impact on hospital in some regards as well. It may not be that medicines are not available. It's the timeliness of some of that availability may become an issue during that period. And I wasn't sure, it was just, I suppose, Neil had briefly spoken as well, so he may have some further information or indications as well, but it was just in terms of everyone else's view on it.
Cathy, you might be best placed to.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I think in the short term, we've had a very high level of reassurances around the medicine supply chain. We're holding more stock in the UK, we're holding much more stock in Northern Ireland than we ever have. Our wholesalers have changed their business models, there's no doubt about that. At least two of our largest wholesalers have moved now to full mainline. For people not familiar with that, that means they're holding a lot more range of stock and they're holding much more volume. So there will be business decisions that will be made by individual companies, and I think we have a reasonable amount of breadth in that market to probably fill in the gaps, I hope. But these are all areas we need to look at. The issue around the pricing and things like that, again, may not necessarily be day one or week one issues, but are issues that we are alive to. Thurlock knows, he sits on the CPNI board, so he knows that there is work that's ongoing around a Northern Ireland drug tariff. A little bit too technical for this conversation, yeah. But I think where we are in general, you know, at a high level, things are changing. Things are changing, and we will have to make you know, significant adaptations to how we manage our supply chain. And there's changes for the pharmaceutical industry, but there's also changes to do with how we manage reimbursement. The point about patient concerns is something we live with day and daily, and people are really, particularly if you have someone who's ill or reliant on a specific medicine, very, very sensitive to incautious remarks that can be made by anyone in the media or social media. We have, Neil, I chair supplies cell, silly terms for things, but it's a group of people that come together now, and we look at every aspect of the supply chain. And I can tell you this week when we met, there's no issues, no issues. And if issues do arise, because we do always have short-term supply issues to deal with, we'll deal with that, and advice will be given. Advice will be given where needed for patients. But you know, there's no areas of concern at this moment in time that particularly for chest, heart, and stroke, or for other patient groups. And as we get into it, we'll be dealing with, as we get into the response phase now in the next few weeks, we'll just be dealing with the issues as they come up.
Mm-hmm. So Cathy, you were saying a wee bit about that grace period that we've got agreed. Will we end up as the negotiations in the last 3 weeks trying to get those things sorted, or can you see those things getting sorted as we plan through the incoming year?
No, it's a very, very good point, Heather. 12 months is not very long for some of these changes, and we've work started now. In fact, work was able to start for some companies even in November, you know, whenever they sort of got an indication, that the strong indication they were going to have an additional time. It meant that some of the sort of cliff edge decisions that felt they were being moved into, like decisions, you know, to pull out of business, things like that, seemed to have receded. There wouldn't be any reason really for any company at all to make a knee-jerk reaction in terms of their business. And to me, it would actually be damaging to their business at this moment in time, when they've got a market here that is existing, vibrant, and it will exist without change for 12 months. And after that, changes will be introduced. But Heather, the work's starting in January, straight after Christmas, on a dedicated work programme, and we've also secured some funding within the 400 million that was announced by Brandon Lewis for the new deal for Northern Ireland, specifically around the healthcare supply chain. And I think that reflects as well the fact that we know we're moving into a new era of change.
Okay. So Wesley, you'd wanted to come back. Wesley Henderson, are you there, Wesley? Do you want to join us and just again say who you are and just say it's workforce question you have?
Thank you. I'm Wesley Henderson. I'm the representative from the Western Health Trust. Just whenever Patricia was speaking very clearly about the immigration constraints in some way for low-skilled workers, my mind was asking me in terms of the independent sector and social care and some of the lower level skilled workers that they maybe rely upon. Will that have an impact if there are any barriers for the service in the independent sector to recruit those from EEA outside the UK and Ireland? You know, I don't know what cohort actually works there, but will that have an impact with this change?
Wesley, yes, it will. I mean, there won't be a route for a work visa for that category of staff. What the Declan had alluded to it, the Migration Advisory Committee, basically their opinion was that immigration shouldn't be the route, that the and as Declan has said, you know, it's about making social care a career choice and making conditions of work and pay better. So there has to be a programme of work to improve that. And, you know, in some respects, the government is kind of, particularly at the minute, with the high unemployment in sectors that would have transferable skills, they're sort of saying that there's a potential market there internally that we may not notice necessarily the full impact of not being able to recruit from Europe immediately. But it is something that we're very well aware that is a problem, and it isn't just a problem for us in Northern Ireland, it's a problem for health and social care right across the UK. And, you know, Declan and NISC are working very much on improving the sort of recognition of social care. And I think the whole COVID piece has really focused on how important social care and that sector is to the whole balance within health and social care within Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK.
What I would maybe add to that, Patricia, is I mean, over the last 9 months, we've witnessed nearly 3,500 what we would call emergency social care workers enter the social care sector in response to COVID-19. Interestingly, 90% of those workers went and worked within the private, voluntary and independent sector. There was a very small percentage that were actually recruited by the Trust.
Very interesting. Layla or Elsa, do you want to just comment on some of those issues? Because I know that has been a bit of a big battle for the work that you've been doing. Layla, no. Come off mute. Okay. So, has anybody else any comment or anything further they want to add? Okay, I don't think so, Cathy. So I think, Cathy, do you want to make any reflections? Or Layla, you're on mute, and we'll just have some final reflections, Patricia too. And then I think the main thing that we can do is just really signpost everybody to the information that's available. And again, we're very happy as NICON to sort of the information we have goes in the bulletins. The Brexit healthcare goes in the bulletins, so people can watch that, and then we can also be a point of contact if you need any support. But do you want to give some final reflections? I'm going to come to Layla first, if she can get off mute there, and then Cathy, and then Patricia, and we'll probably just close.
Sorry, I missed the last bit there,
No,
but just to say that I think that so much preparation has gone into Brexit, and everybody has put tons and tons and tons of effort into this. So hopefully, whichever way the negotiations go, things won't be too bad. But I do think that there's almost certainly going to be unexpected and unpredictable issues. So I think that we're all going to have to be prepared for those and act as we can as these things start to emerge.
Yeah, but I suppose the significant message is there has been massive amount of preparation and discussion.
And lots of practices. Given the numbers of times that we almost left and then not quite, it feels like we have had some rehearsals as to our preparations for a no-deal Brexit.
Okay. Cathy, do you want to just make some
thanks,
final reflections?
Thanks, and thanks everyone for the time today. I suppose my main reflection would be similar to Layla. The enormous amount of work's gone in. I think Jonathan summed it up when he said, look, we're as ready as we can be. We've done as much as we can do now up to the point of change, which is coming now in a few weeks' time. Then we have to get into the point of just working through what arises. I think both in our personal lives and also in professional lives, there's going to be things that will arise that will have been consequences of this that we won't have foreseen. We'll just have to work through them. But there's an enormous amount of support available for the HSC and also for an independent sector working with the HSC. We're providing a lot of advice, and we're continuing to work very actively with the arm's length bodies now, and we will continue to do that. And thank you, Heather, for directing people to the websites and things as well.
No,
I think it's just we're moving into a new era, and we have to we'll have to work together. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think our job is really just trying to keep socializing these messages, because I think sometimes they're so complicated people just turn off and then you can't manage the information. So it's just trying to keep that as simple as we can and get the information and signposting right. Patricia, did you want to have any final?
I think I would just like to sort of agree with what Layla and Cathy have said. And in my area, I do think that there's an awful lot of things are already in place. They are complicated, but I think people should ask questions. I think that's important, particularly around rights and the settlement scheme, and the continuation of the citizens' rights within the withdrawal agreement. I think those things, the questions need to be asked, and people need to be able to maintain those rights. And there will be things coming out within the next year. I think that if in the event of a no deal, that's not the end of the story, I don't think, by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and maybe we can come back if necessary and sort of do some updates later in the year when we get going. Okay, I'm going to have a special thank you to Layla and Ilse for joining from England, and Patricia and Cathy from here. And I hope today was helpful. And we'll follow up with a wee email with the link and some of the links that you might need. And if you want to feedback, that would be great. Okay, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy Christmas. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Heather.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Heather.